go, it's gonna go.
Scary? Boy, was it scary.
It's very demoralizing, and it makes me feel helpless.
It's a chance for these people who are long dead. None of them are alive. So they're now speaking to us, telling us the story of the war.
Sometimes when people say, what was the worst day of it, you're spoilt for choice, really.
It's one of the strongest storms ever to hit the United States, with powerful winds, torrential rain, and a storm surge higher than most houses. Hurricane Michael came ashore with winds of 155 miles an hour, destroying buildings and knocking out electricity potentially for weeks. Tens of thousands of people were warned to evacuate before the storm arrived, but many chose to stay. I spoke to them about why.
The wind, before the eye came over the top, the wind was just incredible to see. I mean, it was just absolutely incredible, because I could open my front door because of the security bars and screen, and we could see out. We watched a lot of the trees fall. It was, honestly, it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. Scary? Boy, was it scary.
It's gonna go, it's gonna go.
What was it like?
Undescribable. Hell. You couldn't see. You look out the windows and you got pieces from people's houses flying by. You got trees flying by. And like I say, it was crazy.
As soon as we seen the roof start ripping off over there, we ran to the bathroom and we stayed in the shower. And then once the roof ripped off, it was pulling us out of there. And the wind was like pulling us out of that little room. I thought these walls would have went next, but they didn't, thank God.
The hallways were flooded, the whole roof was torn off, and our room was next, actually, for the roof to come off. We just stayed there and waited and just, you know, had faith in the Lord.
Well, I got 1 million kids, so shit, if anything was to happen, it was them that I was thinking about first.
I'm a mama,
ain't
so
really
I was
too
crying
much to think
like
about for me. It's these guys. So, you know, we made it. I kept a little look out the window. It was snapping trees like twigs, but, you know, I ain't let them look at none of it.
Never had devastation like this. But I got my memories, but it still hurts so bad to see all their houses. I knew everybody on this block, everybody. We're all like family. We'd all get together, have cookouts and everything. So I don't know what they're gonna do.
The family of a Durham University PhD student who are appealing for his release after it's been revealed he's been held in solitary confinement in the Gulf for 5 months. Matthew Hedges was arrested at Dubai airport as he tried to return home at the end of a research trip. It's thought he's been accused of spying.
If he was a spy, he would be absolutely terrible because he would be far too conspicuous. He was doing research, and he was very transparent about what his research was, and he was very open about it. These months have been hell on earth to him, as they have to me, because I haven't been able to be there for him. With his depression and anxiety, which he was due to start treatment for, non-medicated treatment, after coming back from his trip, he has struggled. 5 months in solitary confinement with no access to any reading material, any audiovisuals, and very limited human contact. It takes a huge toll on anyone, let alone someone who has a depression issue. It's frustrating, it's heartbreaking, and for me, as his wife and as his confidant and as the person who is willing to give up on anything for him, it just, it's very demoralizing, and it makes me feel helpless, and it makes me question humanity, how insensitive and how lacking of emotion can you be to deny an innocent man the right treatment for their illness? Many of my concerns and many of my pleas have been dismissed by the UAE authorities. That, to me, is a big slap on the face, not just to Matt and to his family, but to Britain.
A decade has passed since UK banks received £500 billion bailout from the British taxpayer.
Amid a catastrophic financial crisis.
And the age of austerity that has followed has been long and painful.
Sky News analysis shows that UK growth has remained so sluggish in the years following the crisis.
With the recovery even worse than America's Great Depression.
Here we were with the banking system on the edge. Well, I remember that the meetings at the IMF and the G20 meetings, people were visibly scared because they could see that the entire system was at risk of simply toppling over. Sometimes when people say, what was the worst day of it, you're spoilt for choice, really. I suppose the most vivid memory is the morning of the 8th of October 10 years ago when I took a call from the then chairman of RBS, which is then the biggest bank in the world, and by size, it was about the same size as the whole of the UK economy. And the bank was hemorrhaging money. There was a run on it. Its shares had been suspended in the stock exchange. And he said, what are you going to do about it? And that's a very odd question to ask me, but you know, he knew we had a plan. And I said, but how long can you last? And there was a pause, and he said, we're going to run out of money in the afternoon. Now, when you think about it, if it had run out of money, the cash machines would have gone off, the doors would have closed. Importantly, it wouldn't just be the customers of RBS and NatWest, the customers of every other bank in the UK, and I suspect America and Europe, would have said, look, if it can go down, so can my bank. And there would have been panic. People couldn't have got money for their families, they couldn't have got money for petrol for the car and so on. So it was one of these things, you plan for things like that happening, you imagine they might happen, but you get the call and it is happening, and you've got to decide in a split second, really, what are you going to do about it? And we decided that we would do everything that was needed to stop it collapsing, and it's just as well we did. Yes, you look and ask yourself, how on earth could this have happened? How could people appear to be so complacent? But if we look now, where we are 10 years later, it is the economic and political consequences of this, and then of course Brexit and all that, that's what worries me more. And the thing about a banking crisis is it's tough and it's bad, but you know how to sort it. And it's painful to sort it and difficult to sort it, but you can sort it. Whereas now we're in something where, if you ask me, how do you sort where we are just now? I find that much more difficult to fathom.
It's 3 years since the murder of Josh Hanson, a particularly violent, random and unprovoked stabbing in North London. And this is the face of the man police want to talk to, the suspect, Shane O'Brien. He has a particularly vivid tattoo on his back. The victim, Josh Hanson's mother, Tracy Hanson, is making an extraordinary appeal for help. She wants information that will lead to the arrest of the suspect, Shane O'Brien.
Clearly our policies in this country are not as liberal as I would like, and I just thought, okay, I've got to do it myself, so I'll be the walking board, if you like, the walking poster. And it is demeaning. The last thing anyone would want to do, especially a mother who's grieving her child, is to walk around with the man the police would like to speak to in connection with his murder on her chest. It's very painful, it's very uncomfortable for me, and to even look at these posters and hand them out is very uncomfortable.
But what drives you?
That's why we put Josh on the back as well, to let people know that there was a human being behind this story, you know, and he had a life and he should still be here.
Maybe an obvious question, what's driving you to do with it?
Get justice, of course, to put an end to this part of the journey. I mean, my life, I'll never actually have justice because I'll never have my son back. But, we have laws in place in this country for the very reason that we don't want people to walk around that carry out acts of violence that end up in a death, a fatality. And a person the police would like to speak to in connection with that needs to be, needs to answer to those questions.
Somebody knows where he is. What would you say to them?
There's more than one person that knows where he is. Obviously, he's being helped. You can't just leave the country in a private jet and then you know, travel around extensively.
What sort of people are helping him?
I've no idea. But clearly people that he's close to and associates, I guess. I don't know. Friends? I don't know.
And you would say to them what?
I'd say to them, step in my shoes, live my pain every single day. Sit around the photos and the memories, that's all I have left of Josh. His clothes, the life that he once had. Try and just, if you can, just try for a minute, just to imagine it. Just watch a film that's got a sad storyline and just put yourself into that sort of frame and just feel that pain. That's my pain, 24 hours a day.
We were in conditions that isolated us completely from civilization.
It's the Great War like you've never seen it before, and now the conflict described as months of boredom followed by moments of terror has been brought to life in a colourful new feature-length documentary. I spoke to director Peter Jackson, who's best known for the Lord of the Rings films, about his passion for the human accounts of a brutal war.
It's a chance for these people who are long dead. They're all dead. Every voice you hear as a person, you know, none of them are alive still. But they're now speaking to us, telling us their story of the war. The one thing the restoration did is it just brought their faces to life. You know, the faces of these people suddenly, where you don't really notice them when they're all sped up, jerky, suddenly they kind of just come into a focus almost. And then seeing their faces, I just thought, well, we can't have any sound other than the voices of the guys that were there. The restoration led me to suddenly understand what this film has to be. And I just thought, well, let's make a movie with the images, you know, restored images, that is basically the veterans telling their own story. Let's not have any historian. I mean, there's lots of documentaries where historians talk about the First World War, and, you know, experts, various people. Let's just let them tell their story. So by that, then they're not telling a story of the strategy and tactics, because as somebody said, as one of the guys said, they didn't know what was happening other than what was actually in front of their eyes was all they knew, because they weren't told anything because of the secrecy. They didn't know what the guys a mile away were doing or a mile over there. They only knew what was in their immediate zone. Was the First World War was this tiny little, tiny little picture of what happened to them, and that was their war. Personally, it was, my grandfather was in the First World War, so even though it's nothing to do, the film doesn't, have him in it because he died in 1940 and there's no pictures of him, but it was still personal to me because, the film is about the common experience of being an infantry soldier on the Western Front. So, when these guys talk about the food they were eating, that's the food that I'm sure that my grandfather ate the same food. So I was certainly really understanding a lot about my grandfather's life in those years, through the voices of the guys telling us their story.
In the UK, 1 in 7 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime.
Fighting the disease is a cause close to the heart of actress Liz Hurley, who lost her grandmother to the illness.
Well, as part of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, she told us about taking part in research exploring the benefits of an active lifestyle to help combat cancer.
You know how we're always told by doctors, stress is a killer, relax everybody. We're like, yeah, well, yeah, great, okay. But what's really fascinating about what Dame Leslie's doing right now is they've been doing an experiment where they've been seeing the cortisol, the stress hormone, in cells, which they've been looking at, and they've been seeing when they've been adding cortisol to a cell, which is then also being treated by chemotherapy, that if the treatment's much less effective if there's cortisol present in the cell. So they're now really thinking that, in fact, stress, not only is it a killer, just sort of as everybody says, it can actually affect possibly the efficiency of your treatment.
So what are the stress-relieving tactics that can be? Because obviously, keeping yourself fit, exercise, that's commonly known to be a good stress reliever. But if you're in the middle of chemo, it doesn't strike me that might necessarily be the best way forward.
Some of the ladies we spoke to, they said that there's some other complementary services that are going alongside. Some of them have been having reflexology during their chemotherapy treatment. But I thought also what was interesting is that I didn't actually know that exercise relaxed you. I thought that exercise revved you up. So I actually did this cortisol test, and they took, saliva at different times, and my cortisol levels were at their lowest after going for a nice brisk walk, and I thought it would be after lying on the sofa watching Netflix or something. I thought that would be actually when you relax the most. Interestingly, it isn't. It is moving around. And so, in fact, they said that even though sometimes when, you know, you're at your tiredest, you want to just lie down, you should walk.
This week, I sat down with the chef and poverty campaigner Jack Monroe to talk about the impact of austerity, her decision to publicly identify as non-binary, her infamous spat with Katie Hopkins that left the broadcaster bankrupt, and whether she has any ambitions to stand as an MP.
Some of the biggest work and most important work that I do is with food banks, with the Trussell Trust Food Bank Network, with sort of giving away books, teaching people to cook, giving away recipes, working with them to develop recipes to teach people to cook with basically food bank parcels, because poverty is a problem in our country and food poverty is a part of that.
I just wonder what you make when you hear the government saying we're doing more to help hard-working families, we're doing more to help single mothers, single parents with their childcare. You've lived that situation and you've heard those words, so I just wonder how that makes you feel.
So I think on the one hand there's a well-meaning segment of government who think they're doing like conservative Christianity, going, oh well, we're going to help you to help yourself.
But you don't think that they get it?
They don't get it because there's no one making those decisions that understands what a couple of weeks delays in benefits, what the impact of that is on somebody's real life.
You did get caught up with a very now famous spat with Katie Hopkins on Twitter. That ended up in a libel case, which she lost. And I'm just wondering how you feel now, because news came out that she has gone bankrupt as a result. And as we talk about slipping into debt and poverty, I just wonder if you have sympathy with her, given that if she'd have apologised, you would have drawn a line under it, but now it's got to this stage.
I don't think either of us expected it to get to here when it started. To be honest, I thought that she would just apologise, because that's the simple and cheapest thing to do, is to just say sorry. But she didn't. She was offered many, many opportunities to pull out of legal proceedings. Like at one point I just said, I just want an apology, no donation, no nothing, just please just apologise in a meaningful way. Because I've got so much abuse over this. I just want you to publicly stand down. And she didn't do it. And I think it's really sad where it's ended up.
Can you ever see yourself switching from campaigner to politics?
Yes. So I've always said when my son is old enough that he can let himself in through the back door and cook himself a meal, I'll consider it. And maybe that gives me a few years to sort of work out where I'm politically aligned as well.
Celebrity and politics have long been entwined, but in recent times, none more so than with one couple. In May, the US president welcomed Kim Kardashian West to the Oval Office following her campaign to free a woman from a life sentence in jail. And now he's opening his doors to the social media star's husband, Kanye, or Ye, as he now likes to be known.
It was something about when I put this hat on, it made me feel like Superman. You made a Superman. That's my favorite superhero. He don't look good, we don't look good.
But should politics and celebrity mix? Or should they stick to their day job and leave the law-making to politicians? I've been catching up with Labour councillor and the drummer in Blur, Dave Rowntree. So why did you want to get involved in politics? I mean, you say that it's low-level politics. Nevertheless, it's politics. You're a county councillor.
Yep. Well, I'm a community activist, so I knock on doors, looking for problems to solve. Being a councillor was sort of an extension of that, really. It meant I could actually...
Well, why did you want to do that instead of rock and roll and, you know, that lifestyle and ice cream vans and being on stage and...
Oh, I didn't want to do it instead. No, I wanted to do it as well. I'm just greedy, I guess. No, I was looking for... When I was young, I thought that if only I could be a pop star, you know, this void inside me would be filled and I could finally be happy. It came as a big shock to me to find out when I was a pop star that it didn't fill the void at all, and I was actually less happy rather than more happy. It turned out what filled the void was meeting up with people one-on-one, trying to solve problems in their lives. So I took on a lot of different responsibilities in association with that. And that's something you don't get as a musician, and something I think a lot of musicians find they're missing in their lives. It's an odd thing.
I think that's what's happening with Kanye West.
Quite possibly, and I've seen it with lots of other musicians as well. And I've had that conversation with lots of other musicians, you know, who are driven to do it, thinking, oh, if only I could be famous, then, you know, I could feel good about myself. And finding when they are famous, it doesn't make any difference. So, yeah, I think a lot of musicians have a sort of midlife crisis, as I did, and find themselves drawn towards you know, being a bit more helpful.
And because, you know, I was slightly rolling my eyes when Kanye West was saying it's not about me. What do you say to people when they say, oh, you know, you're just doing it to raise your profile ahead of the next tour or whatever?
Well, I don't think being a county councillor is a particularly good profile raiser, except in university wards where my star rises high.
There you go.
But no, I think, you know, the politicians and artists of various guises have often looked at each other because artists have an awful lot of influence, but they have no power, whereas politicians have no influence at all, but have all the power.
What's happening with Blur?
Well, there are no plans at the moment. We all finished the last bout of touring and record releasing saying, oh, we must do that again. That was fun. So I guess at some point it'll probably happen, but there are no plans at the moment.
OK, well, we're looking forward to it whenever it might be. Come on and tell us as soon as you've decided.
You'll be the first to know, Kay.
Oh, remember he said that, OK?